This is a large 2.5-story brick L-shaped dwelling with dormers on the north and west facades. There is a covered porch along the north facade and part of the west facade. Above this porch is a small open balcony with metal railings. Toward the rear are a series of extensions. The style is reserved and features characteristics of the Edwardian style: smooth unadorned brick, plain lintels. James Dunn arrived from Ireland with his mother and other siblings by the late 1840s. Around 1865, shortly after the marriage of James and Eliza, they began acquiring land. They first lived in a small frame house, then built a larger one, about 1875, for themselves and their 5 children. After Eliza's death, James continued to improve his farm. By 1900 he had 300 acres west of Indian Lake. Upon James' death in 1902, the property was passed to Martin and Sarah, 2 of his children who were unmarried. 2 other children, John and Jim, became doctors. Jim and his wife Alicia built a brick house in 1917 on family land. This structure is a testimony, along with the original and smaller Dunn frame house next to it, of the increasing prosperity of the Irish families in the area who arrived following the potato famine. It does much to support and document the farming activity in the area, and, further, it is historically linked to its surroundings and the Dunn family. This dwelling is a 1.5-story L-shaped dwelling. It has a front gable plan which faces the road, while the rear easterly extension has a small gable framing a second-story window. The main entrance is offset to the right and covered by an open porch. 2 brick chimneys still exist. This property is historically linked to the area since it was built by one of the many boatmen who worked along the Rideau Canal corridor, the canal only being a short distance away. This large 2.5-story rectangular brick house has an unusual extended 2-story bay-like projection along the front facade, which appeared to have a door leading to a now missing 2-story balcony. There is a large central dormer facing north. The main entrance is covered by an enclosed porch. It is most likely that this house was built the same year John Sullivan bought the land in 1922, since the tax records of that year showed him paying $50 for the land and $750 for anything built upon the property. Sullivan, along with Mr. Fahey, owned a mine near Sand Lake around 1916. According to Ken Watson, mining in the Rideau area has a long history. One example is the Sand Lake mine, begun by Ed Schultz in 1870 to mine phosphate. It was then purchased by the Broadville Mining Company in 1900 for extracting mica, after which Sullivan and his partner purchased it. This house is historically linked to a long tradition of mining along the Rideau, as stated in the historical value, and thus helps to support the early industry of mining in the area. Although further research is required, it appears as though the house was built into sections. The first may have been the smaller, 1.5-story portion with a gable roof of metal and brick chimney. The larger section has a gambrel roof and entrances on the south and north sides. William Brown purchased this lot in 1886 for $50 and 1 year later began paying taxes at a rate of $425. This house, therefore, was most likely built at this time. Brown was a merchant and postmaster for Elgin between 1896 to 1919. This house is historically linked to its surroundings due to its association with Mr. Brown and its physical qualities. This large and handsome 2.5-story dwelling and store still retains a lot of integrity. Its large windows to display merchandise, recessed double doors with light transom are still intact, as is the classically inspired entablature. The basement is rusticated with large stones. Multiple dormers on all sides helped to illuminate the attic. used for storage. The large windows on the second floor have rounded heads which are complemented by brick pissoirs. The water was supplied with the combination of a windmill and rooftop gravity. The easterly portion features an open porch and balcony above. W. A. Singleton was so impressed with this store that he copied the design for his own store in Crosby. John and his brother William Darganville established the merchant business in Elgin in 1868 and built a frame store on Main. The business was expanded when John built this large store on a lot where Ira Mitchell had a house. It was moved to Halliday Street. This store was one of the largest in northern Leeds County and boasted some of the most up-to-date features such as gas lighting. The basement was used to store cheese from Darganville's factories while the first floor displayed merchandise and was used as a telegraph office. The second floor was used by Darganville's daughter who sold china ware and linen, and there was also an office for a full-time bookkeeper. The attic was used as additional storage space. The eastern section of the building was used as living quarters with bedrooms on the second floor and Darganville's office on the first. Darganville was an active member of the community who was involved in the local dairy industry, served as TWP clerk and an MP for the provincial legislature. His only son, John Sottle, helped found the South Crosby Rural Telephone Company and expanded the family business. In 1997, the store became an antique shop known as Mainly Antiques. The contextual value of this building lies in the visual link it helps to create along Main Street. It is similar to other Birch structures including the Alma Newman store directly across the street with its large store facade and east wing used as a residence. Both buildings are at the head of Main, therefore helping to define the commercial identity of this street and defines the commercial importance of this street because of its continued use as an antique shop. Historically, it is a testimony to the increasing commercial competition in the village at the close of the 19th century. It further was witness to the prosperous rise of the Darganville family with their financial and political ventures. It is all the more important considering that the original Darganville frame store is no longer in existence. The red brick structure is composed of two conjoined buildings that were built together and thus always connected. Part 1 West half, former store, is a two-story building with rectangular false front with simple frieze. It has 3 upper-story windows with rectangular pissoirs. The lower floor is concealed by a covered porch. Part 2 East half is a 1 1/2 story with central front gable which contains a semicircular window. The central doorway has a transom and side lights. The windows have rectangular pissoirs. There is a converted woodshed/summer kitchen at the rear of the residence. Extension appears in 1908 fire insurance map. This east section resembles the Rideau cottage plan and design. The entire building is set high on a stone foundation and has a cross-gabled medium-pitched roof covered in metal. Almond S. Newman, the original owner of this building, was an early entrepreneur in the village of Elgin who was originally from a Quaker family who farmed near Sand Lake. In 1862, the Newmans had a small shop on their property, but the location wasn't ideal and therefore Almond purchased a lot from the Mitchells and in 1867 built his shop and residence at the main, busy crossroads of the developing village. Newman had a variety of projects that eventually caused him to lease the property. Sherman Coon and Hiram S. Davison were both owners of the dry goods store, while John Darganville turned it into a plumbing supplies shop that doubled as an early gas station. In the 1940s/1950s, it housed the Elgin Post Office before being made into a residence in 1958. The building was erected along the main street at the primary crossroads in the developing village of what was soon to become Elgin, during its first real boom period late 1860s, early 1870s, and therefore it relates to other structures in the village and along Main built around the same time. Its original function as a store with a connected residence relates it with other buildings along Main Street that also served dual functions. Finally, more generally, It contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin, specifically the development along Main Street. Beneath the many additions and alterations brought to this house over the course of its history, it is still possible to make out the original structure. The central core of the building resembles many other homes built around the turn of the century by the Stanton builders. Rectangular shape, small dormer which follows the roof line, double bay on the second floor of the main facade. The roof style, being tipped, is similar to how George Stanton used to build his homes. This house may have begun as early as 1878 since Mary Tennant purchased this lot that year for $200. 1 year later it was sold to Mary Fox for $630. However, there was a substantial jump in the property value between 1898 and 1911 when the lot sold for $1,700. One of the residents of this building was Adelbert Deb Campbell, an undertaker. The garage at the rear of the property was used to park the hearses. This house still has a visual link with other houses built in the Stanton style, although it has been transformed a lot over the course of its history. The northerly central core of this building is the historic portion of this house. The style resembles a Gothic cottage because of the central gable which frames a pointed window. The closed-in porch along the front and west facades is a later addition. Malcolm Kirst arrived in South Cross BC 1875 from Germany and settled in Elgin. It is about this time that he purchased a lot in the village and established a blacksmith shop from which could also be produced wagon wheels. This shop was located to the west of the house but has since been destroyed. It is probable that he also built this house. The house was then sold to various owners until 1971 when Walter Scotland, owner of Scotland Funeral Home, purchased all of Lot 9. Sometime after this, the house became a store known as Petals and Presents Florist. This property is historically linked to its surroundings because of its first resident and also helps to support the early character of the village because of its architectural style. The building is a 1 1/2 story red brick building with an L-shaped plan, set on a stone foundation and capped with a cross-gabled metal roof. There are 3 chimneys, 2 brick ones on the front facade and 1 cinder block chimney at the rear. The windows are rectangular with rounded hoods and arched voussoirs, except for a smaller semi-elliptical window on the west-facing facade also with an arched voussoir and a semicircular window inset on a central gable on the south-facing facade of the east wing. The front porch, which covers the entire first story of the south-facing facade, features decorative bargeboard, which appear, along with the posts and railings, in a 1940 photograph. There is an old barn in the rear which has been converted into a garage and appears on the 1908 fire insurance map. The trustees of the Methodist Church of South Crosby purchased this lot in 1857 from Philemon Pannell. It was not sold again until 1958. Tax assessment records are inconsistent regarding taxes for this property. The first mention of a reverend on the approximate lot or of a parsonage is in 1891 when it was assessed at $700. Its value fluctuates from year to year, but it was most likely built before 1891. A C-1868 map of Elgin shows a parsonage on the property, but this is most likely not the present structure. The village book mentions that it was built during the ministry of Thomas McCammon, who served the church from 1886 to 1890. Records at the Methodist Church may exist to confirm this mention. It appears to have served as the manse for the Methodist, which became the United Church until 1958. It is one of the brick residences built in the village of Elgin during its second major boom period mid-1880s until 1910, and therefore it relates to other homes built around this time, often out of brick. It's related with the United formerly Methodist Church on Main Street, as it served as the manse for almost 70 years. More generally, the building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin and specifically the Main Street. The 1 1/2 story building consists of 2 principal sections. once used as two separate residences. Unknown if this is still the case today, conjoined by a central section. The first section has a rectangular plan and a roofed front veranda with central door. It also has a dormer on the west-facing sloped roof. The second section crosses the first section at the rear and consists of a central door on its sloped roof side with a dormer window. On the east-facing facade is a small two-story bay window. The entire building appears to be clad in siding and capped with a shingled cross-gabled roof, all set on a stone foundation. Unknown if it is the same foundation, or pieced together at different points. The general shape of the house appears on the 1908 fire insurance map. Because this property is both on a part lot and consists of different pieces conjoined, it is difficult to determine dates of construction. The first major value jump occurred between 1872 and 1873 when it was owned by Benjamin Leggett. However, he also owned the other house on the lot, a brick 1½ story, which more likely explains the jump. When the lot was first divided by Macdonald Howard in 1897, it was sold for $650, indicating that there was most likely something on the lot at this time. However, 6 years earlier, the Howards were assessed for only $500 in taxes, which included the brick building on the other part of the lot. Therefore, the first section of this building was most likely constructed by Howard BTW 1891 and 1897. In 1901, Fred Wood sold the lot to Jarvis Randolph for double his buying price, suggesting that another section could have been added during this period. Taxes from 1903 list both Fred Wood and Jarvis Randolph, both close to the approximate location of the lot, so it is possible they lived in the two different sections. Jeff Randolph sold the property in 1919, again for double its buying price, once again suggesting another added section. By the production of the 1908 fire insurance map, the house has its general shape. Even though the front projection is listed as brick veneer, the brick veneer may have been removed, or this section even destroyed and rebuilt. It is unclear from the records. It was sold to Joseph Kinney, who owned the Kinney Hotel in Jones Falls. This building was constructed along Main Street during Elgin's second major boom period, which covered the decades around the turn of the century. Due to its irregularity, primarily thanks to its number of conjoined parts, it does not strongly relate architecturally to others in the village, although its various pieces do somewhat resemble other simple 1½ story gabled roof residences. Nonetheless, it contributes to the heritage character of the village, specifically the development along Main Street. This 2.5-story building served as a residence and store for much of its early life. These functions are evident in the form of the building, in which the commercial portion sits flush with the street while the living accommodations are set back from the street toward the rear of the building. This later part has its own entry found under an open porch with Ionic columns. It is built in the familiar Stanton-style rectangular form, dormer which follows the roof line, the double bay of windows on the second floor. The roof is hipped but flat on top, the style which James Stanton employed when building his homes. The commercial portion still has large picture windows and a recessed door. In the gable which faces the street there are 2 sash windows and decorative shingles, a feature found in the Edwardian style. According to the Elgin book 1940, this building served as the tin shop and hardware store of C.F. Kerr until 1916, when he became the postmaster. The commercial portion of this dwelling was then converted into Elgin's second post office. The building also housed the rural telephone office for some time prior to 1924. This property is historically linked to Elgin because of its former use as the port office and because of its familiar architectural style which visually links it to its surroundings. This 2.5-story house is very similar to other houses built in the Stanton style, characterized by the hipped roof, small dormer, square/rectangular form, and double bay on the second story. George Stanton purchased part of Lot 8 in 1903 for 1902, and it is most likely that shortly afterward he built this house. Along with other similarly styled houses, this house helps to support the historic character of the village, especially recalling the period of the town's history when it was a thriving community at the turn of the 20th century. This building is a 1½ story red brick first story covered in stucco/plaster rectangular building with side projection, all set on a stone foundation. From the roof lines and windows, it is clear that the side projection and main building were not constructed at the same time, however both appear on the 1908 fire insurance map. The roof of the main structure is gabled, however the roof of the projection is a shed roof, both of which are covered in shingles. There is a front central gable which features a semicircular window. The remaining windows are rectangular with rectangular voussoirs. There is a dormer window at the rear of the building, a simple frieze under the eaves and returns on the sides of the main structure. There is a rear addition that appears to be a converted woodshed/summer kitchen appears on the 1908 fire insurance map. The main part of the structure resembles the popular Rideau cottage style of architecture, which also matches the general time period. This lot was first purchased by William Young in 1863. The same year, Miles Young took out a $600 mortgage for the property. However, when Miles Young sold it to Benjamin Leggett in 1872, it was only sold for $100. Tax rolls give no further clues as the owners disappeared from 1869 until 1876 when Leggett was assessed for $700. The Elgin Village Book states that it was built by Mr. Young before being sold to Benjamin Leggett. However, in her book, Sue Warren maintains that it was built by Benjamin Leggett. As the property was passed between Benjamin Leggett, William Leggett and James Horton, the value was steady at approximately $1,000. It was owned for nearly 20 years by Rev. Nat Howard before being sold to Rouswell, who sold it to Henry Ripley. It is possible that a fire occurred and destroyed part of the building and it was rebuilt. However, this lead has not been fully pursued. It appears to have stayed in the Ripley family for over 80 years as the property doesn't come up again until 1997. The building was erected along the main street in the village of Elgin during its first real boom period, late 1860s, early 1870s, and therefore it relates to other structures in the village and along Main built around the same time. More generally, it contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin, specifically the development along Main Street. The building is a two-story vinyl-clad, roughly square structure capped with a hipped roof covered in shingles and a rear one-story addition with a shed roof. The front facade features an off-center middle door, flanked by two windows and partially concealed by a small roofed porch with tapered columns that appears in a 1940 photograph. This building was most likely built for the South Crosby Telephone Company specifically, which explains some of its architectural features. For example, the rear addition was used as storage. The 1908 fire insurance map shows a 1½ story brick veneer structure on the approximate site of this building. The presence of this structure could explain the relatively high value of the land. However, the major increase in sale price occurred between 1915 and 1917 when it was bought and consequently sold by A. L. Campbell for $435 and $1,700 respectively. The modest yet dwarven style of this building matches this time period. The village book states that the rural telephone office was moved to its location in 1924, when property was purchased across the street from its temporary home in the post office, but this is most likely referring to another telephone company. However, Land Registry does not note a sale until 1947 when the executors of Martin Murphy sell the property to the telephone company. However, his building was used as the location of the office much prior to that. Its use as a telephone office explains the relatively odd style of the building. specifically the blank first floor east facade WH. The switchboards were housed and the rear extension that was used for storage. It was owned by a telephone company until 1972. This building was built during the final part of the second boom period experienced by Elgin in a style that is found throughout the village, roughly square, symmetrical facades, with hipped roof. It has served as both a residence and an office, connecting it with numerous other properties along Main Street that have also served different functions. More generally, it contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin, specifically the development along Main Street. The building is a two-story red brick structure set on a stone foundation and capped with a hipped roof covered in tin. There are two dormers on the sloped roof, both with decorative woodwork. The windows are all rectangular with rounded hoods, sandstone sills, and all having arched voussoirs and buff brick. The lower story voussoirs are decorative and more pronounced. There is also joining on all sides in the same buff brick. The front facade features a porch, covered on top and open on the lower story. There is a rear one-story extension, possibly a converted woodshed/summer kitchen, or else a section added by Dr. Kerr for his office. There is also a small one-story addition on the west side. The building is a great example of Edwardian architecture, mainly popular in urban areas in the years preceding WWI. There is also a two-story wood barn with metal roof in the rear. Herman Kuhn, the original owner of this building, worked a family farm for over 45 years near the Dancy School area. His wife Allura had connections with the village of Elgin, being the daughter of Benjamin Halliday. In 1909, Kuhn retired from farming and bought a lot in Elgin, originally and nearly half a century the sites of Samuel Seed's blacksmith shop. The significant increase in taxes indicates the house was built very soon after its purchase. The Kuhn family only spent winters in the large residence, having a cottage on Sand Lake for the summers. Norman Kerr, a doctor, acquired the building in 1941 and used it as his office and residence for over 50 years. It is one of the large brick Edwardian/late Victorian residences built in the village of Elgin during its second major boom period mid-1880s until 1910, and therefore it relates to other stately homes built around this time, often out of brick. When it served as the office and residence of Dr. Kerr, it related to other buildings along Main Street that were meant to serve dual functions as both residences and places of workshops, offices, etc. More generally, the building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin and specifically the Main Street. The building is a two-story red brick building set on a stone foundation with a cross-hipped roof covered in metal. The windows are rectangular with rounded hoods and arched voussoirs with sandstone sills and keystones. A simple frieze runs under the eave on all facades. On the front and east sloping roof are dormer windows with decorative woodworking details. The front facade features a covered porch which obscures the original doorway. There is a side projection on the east facade with a very small porch and second-floor balcony. In 1885, George Mustard purchased all of Lot 27 from Thomas Cummers for $875. Mustard did not split the lot until 1911, so it is difficult to tell exactly when the brick house was built. However, the southwest portion of the lot, the section without the brick house, was sold in 1911 for $1,000, indicating that this was most likely the built section for which Mustard was assessed $450 in 1910. Taxes significantly increased in 1912 to $1,450, despite Mustard having less land, and therefore the brick house was most likely built around the time the lot was divided by Mustard in 1911, and the architectural style confirms this period. It also doesn't seem to appear on the 1908 fire insurance map. Mustard, which had an insurance company, lived here until 1943, upon which T.H.A. Mustard acquired the property before selling in 1980. It is one of the large brick Edwardian/late Victorian residences built in the village of Elgin during its second major boom period mid-1880s until 1910, and therefore it relates to other stately homes built around this time, often out of brick. More generally, the building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin and specifically the main street. The structure is a 1½ story rectangular building, the front facade covered in a new stone and the sides and rear in siding. The roof is of medium pitch, covered in shingles with a cinder block chimney on the west-facing facade. The two original brick chimneys are gone. The central doorway, which appears slightly off-center to the one side light on the new door, is flanked by rectangular windows with voussoirs in the new stone of the front facade. In the rear of the building, there is a one-story extension, most like an old woodshed or summer kitchen that has been converted. This extension appears on the 1908 fire insurance map and appears in a photo from the turn of the century. According to the village book, a James Young originally lived on this property and may have started the current building as a hotel. A James Young does appear in the census and Peter Sweetney's diary. However, it is still unclear if he started the present building because the value increase was minimal and there is no other concrete evidence. The first value jump that confirms the building on the site occurred in 1867, a year after Ransom Baker appears on the lot, even though he didn't buy the land until 1873. Baker, the shoemaker, ran his business out of his home or possibly in an outbuilding, and his daughter Charlotte Lottie was an Elgin school teacher for many years. Baker died in 1916, but his daughter Charlotte kept the house until her death in 1930, upon which it passed to her husband, Martin Beadle. The residence/business was built along the main street in the developing village of Elgin during its first boom period late 1860s to the early 1870s, and therefore it relates to other structures in the village and along Main Street, more specifically those that were built around the same time. Its original function as both a residence and shop connects it with other buildings along Main Street that also served dual functions. Finally, it contributes more generally to the heritage character of the village of Elgin, specifically what developed along Main Street. This building is a two-story structure with a roughly square plan, clad in vinyl siding and capped with a hipped shingled roof. The front facade features 3 bays with a central door and a central dormer window on the sloped roof. There is an east side porch that is attached to a rear side addition, possibly a converted woodshed and or summer kitchen. The cinder block chimney is on the west-facing facade and a new metal chimney on the rear addition. Hugh Soper officially acquired this piece of land, adjacent to the sawmill, in 1914, although he appears as early as 1912 in the tax assessment rolls. Because this structure was on the same relative land as the sawmill also owned by Hugh Soper, it's difficult to trace a precise date built. There is a slight increase in 1913 for value of the sawmill, lands which would have included this house, that may be explained by the year being built, but it is still unclear. It is certain, however, that the house was built before summer 1914. Tax assessment for the sawmill. The only time Soper is listed for the 2 years are generally the same. This building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin. It was built at the end of the second major boom period in the village, which lasted for a few decades around the turn of the century. It is also architecturally linked with numerous other buildings in the village, built around the same period, in the same style, roughly square plan, hit-proof, symmetrical. This handsome structure exhibits many traits which were popular during the Romanesque revival period 1850 to 1900. Some of these important characteristics include narrow and rounded arch windows and openings, large and heavy cut stone, square tower with round corner buttresses and oversized finials, arcaded narthex. There is a second corner tower to the east with paired windows. Both the east and west extremities are semicircular, one serving as the apse while the other can be used for Sunday school or for overflow seating. In 1959, Excavations were done under the church to add a hall, kitchen, furnace room and washrooms. Centennial Hall was built by the congregation in 1966. The 1908 fire insurance map shows that the church lot was bordered to the east, west, and south by a one-story woodshed. When built, the interior had red birch pews from Parrington, Barker's Seat Company of Dundas. In the Halliday burial ground can be found a stones Emil submerged vault most likely built at the same time as the second church, with stones that were brought for the church. The entrance, fronting on Main Street, is a solid metal door and the structure has a simple gable roof. The first Evangelical Methodist church on this site was built on land and with money donated by Ebenezer Halliday in 1856 to 7 beside the existing Halliday burial ground. Due to sand the structure was built on, the church was unstable. Further, in 1884, two branches of the Methodist Church united which created a need for a larger church. In 1893, the decision was taken to tear down the old church and build this present structure. It was dedicated in 1894. The entire community was involved in the construction and for raising the necessary funds. A newspaper article described it as one of the finest country churches in the Dominion. In 1922 it became the Elgin United Church with the Union of Methodist, Congregational, and Presbyterian denominations. This structure is a landmark within Elgin which attests to the long tradition of Methodist worship in Elgin. It occupies a prominent place along Main Street and is still being maintained by the congregation. It is functionally and historically linked to its surroundings, especially to the Halliday burial ground. It is also a testimony of the growth and progressive stance held by the community just before the turn of the 20th century. It was the pride of the community. Further, it set precedents for the other churches in town as these were built soon with similar characteristics. This building is a one-story rough stone structure with an irregular plan. The front facade features a square tower, set at an angle to the southwest corner, with two pointed arched wood doors, stone buttresses and crenellated top. The main part of the building is rectangular with a small projection on the west side. The roof of this part of the structure is of medium pitch, covered in shingles and features two small dormers with semicircular pointed arch windows. The windows on the main part of this structure are rounded with voussoirs in a lighter stone. This facade also features stone buttresses. The apse is three-sided with small pointed arch windows. This church is a good example of Romanesque Revival architecture, even though some of its details are more characteristically Gothic Revival. Its low roof line, crenellated square tower, rough stone materials and weighty appearance are all features of Romanesque churches built around the turn of the century. Anglicans in Elgin began holding regular worship services in the community hall since the 1880s. By 1902, the building committee was created and plans begun to build a church. J.R. Dargantle spearheaded the plans by donating part of his lot. Various community members banded together to raise money and complete the church. Various business owners throughout the area donated materials and money for its construction. The architect was Frank Lent of Gananoque, who answered to Dargantle, while James Stanton did much of the interior woodwork. The church was opened for Christmas in 1905 with Reverend Joseph Stanton as rector. In 1906, the church was formally dedicated. The Anglican Church of Canada sold the building in the first few years of the early 21st century. This building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin. It served as the Anglican church in the village for a century. Although its current function is in question and transition, it is still contextually connected with Anglicans in Elgin and the surrounding area. It's architecturally connected with a number of modest Romanesque churches that were constructed throughout eastern Ontario around the turn of the century. Finally, its material stone connects it with the other two churches in the village, the only stone structures within the village boundaries. This building is a two-story frame house with a regular plan, set on a stone foundation capped with a hipped roof covered in shingles. There are decorative brackets which run under the eaves set at regular intervals completely around the structure. Two-story bay windows face Main/Water Street. One which was added later, most likely 1920s, the second which was added after Coon's purchase in 1897 and features an elaborate bay window with a highly decorated third-story gable with a unique keyhole-shaped frame containing three windows. The rear extension was most likely added during Coon's extension. The windows are mainly rectangular with rounded hoods which are partially concealed by thick sills and decorated frames. An open veranda with decorative bargeboard and posts covers three sides of the first story. The original section of the house may have been designed more consistently as Italianate, with its more regular plan, decoration, specifically the decorative brackets under the eave and low-sloping high pagest roof. However, its rear addition, although keeping with similar decoration, is more characteristically Queen Anne. Therefore, the Guthrie House can be described as an imposing vernacular example of Queen Anne architecture, characterized by its extensive and intricate decoration, irregularities, bay windows and broad gables. This lot was first acquired by Henry Lashley in 1857, and according to the census of 1861, the Lashleys were living in a frame dwelling on this site. Walling's map of 1862. Lashley was a former school teacher who had recently become a merchant and opened a shop in the village, the $7 store. He also became active in the local lumber and potash industries. After some changes in ownership throughout the years, the Lashleys reacquired their property in 1879. 7 years later, the Lashleys opened a large mortgage and hired John Stanton and Mr. Grail to construct a new residence on their lot. When both the Lachleys died in the 1890s, the property passed through owners before being bought by Augustus Kuhn in 1897, who acquired the property for his son, Dr. Barius A. Kuhn, who used it as a home and office for his medical practice until 1941. It was after Kuhn's purchase in 1897, that the large rear extension to the house was added. Silas Stevens, who built the central garage on Perth, bought it, eventually selling it to Glenn Guthrie in 1963, who lived in the house with his family and brother Ron Guthrie, both of whom purchased Stevens' garage as well. It has now been turned into a center for various social services. Built at the beginning of Elgin's second major boom and expanded in the midst of it, the building relates to other built during this period. This second boom witnessed the building of a number of large residences, the Lachley House being one of the largest and most imposing. When it served as the office and residence of Dr. Kuhn, it related to other buildings along Main Street that were meant to serve dual functions as both residences and places of workshops, offices, etc. More generally, it contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin and specifically the Main Street and its second boom period in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This large two-story house resembles, in certain respects, other houses in Elgin built by the Stantons. Similar traits include the rectangular flashbox-like form with a hip roof, an offset main entrance and a facade with two bays. This particular house also features a central small pointed gable framing a tiny rounded window in the attic. Along the length of the main facade is an open porch with a metal roof and tapered columns. To the rear of the house has been added a one-story addition. Ursula Pearson Pennant purchased part of Lot 39 from William Pennant in 1896 for $670. It is difficult to determine if a structure already existed, if the Pearsons modified it or had a new one built. Ursula's husband, William, was a tinsmith who settled in Elgin after 1880. This property, because of its stylistic association with other Stanton-style houses in the village, helps to maintain the historic roots of Elgin in terms of a town which experienced much growth at the end of the 19th century. The building is a 1 1/2 story red brick structure with a medium-pitched roof covered in shingles. The front sloping roof has a dormer with two windows and the side gables feature returns. The front facade has a central doorway with evidence of a much larger central door and sign above it. There is a large side addition that features a two-story covered porch. There is also a rear one-story addition with flat roof, date unknown, could be original extension. It's mostly characteristic of a modest Georgian style of architecture, with its symmetry, simplicity and solid forms. Benjamin Halliday, who purchased this land from Philemon Pennant in 1856, was the son of Ebenezer Halliday, one of the first residents of what was to become Elgin. By selling off village lots, Benjamin Halliday was able to invest in building the large brick home and adjoining carriage shop. In 1859, the value of Halliday's lot increased to £160. It is unclear if the house or carriage shop was built at this time, or later, when between 1866 and 1867, the assessed value of Halliday's lot increased to $1,000 from $250 the year before. The brick was said to have come from Amos Merriman's brickyard. Benjamin Halliday operated his carriage shop until the 1870s when he decided to concentrate on farming. This building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin. It is connected with the large residence next to it that was built at the same time, most likely with the same brick. It's contextually related to the Halliday estate and most of the other buildings on the east side of Perth Street that were originally on this estate. It was constructed during Elgin's first major boom period and thus relates to this period and other buildings built at this time. This is a large two-story brick home that has undergone substantial alterations throughout its existence. Most notably, The roof line has been modified to create a flat roof structure. Lacking photographic evidence of its former appearance, it is difficult to categorize its style. Apparently, it had a roof similar to the mansard roof of the Philip Halliday house, in which case the style can be identified as Second Empire. The shape of the home, rectangular with projecting bays on both the north and south facades, is a shape used in the Second Empire and Queen Anne styles. Both these styles were in use when the house was built. Many of the windows are accentuated with curved brick voussoirs. The foundation is rusticated with large stones. James S. Dargaville's wife, Laura, purchased this lot in 1903 for $575. Tax assessment records show that his 1-acre lot on Lot 13 concession was worth $1,000 in 1900 for $200 for the land and $800 for the building. In 1905, however, he appears to pay the same amount as the year before in addition to $2,500, $300 for the land and $2,200 for the building. The next few years, the tax records show Dargaville paying only the $2,500 fee. It therefore appears that Dargaville had a home on the lot that was then replaced by the current structure in 1905. Despite the many alterations, this building nevertheless has historic value because its size and construction material demonstrate the wealth and prosperity with which certain members of the community had amassed at the turn of the 20th century. It is also linked in part with other prestigious homes in the village, like the Philip Halliday house. The building is a two-story structure, originally of brick, now covered in stucco, and with a flat-topped tipped roof covered in shingles. The front facade features 3 symmetrical bays. The central doorway has a transom and side lights, enclosed in a roofed porch with highly decorative turned posts and woodwork. Above the central doorway on the 3rd floor is a central gable, also highly decorated with woodwork designs, featuring 3 semicircular windows. The upper story windows aside from the one in the front gable are rectangular with rounded hoods and large wood sills. The lower story windows are semicircular with rectangular trim. There is a small dormer semicircular window on the south-facing sloped roof. This same facade features a small roofed porch with decorative woodwork and turned posts. There appears to be a brick chimney at the rear. In her book, Sue Warren mentions that the original roofline was most likely altered sometime around the turn of the century. This could explain the hybrid archite, seatorial style and turn of the century period detailing. The original etching she refers to could not be found. There appears to be no apparent modifications or changes, except for the one mentioned by Warren. Benjamin Halliday, who purchased this land from Philemon Pennant in 1856, was the son of Ebenezer Halliday, one of the first residents of what was to become Elgin. By selling off village lots, Benjamin Halliday was able to invest in building the large brick home and adjoining carriage shop. In 1859, the value of Halliday's lot increased to £160. It is unclear if the house was built at this time, or later, when between 1866 and 1867, the assessed value of Halliday's lot increased to $1,000 from $250 the year before. The brick was said to have come from Amos Merriman's brickyard. Benjamin Halliday operated his carriage shop until the 1870s when he decided to concentrate on farming. When he died in 1903, the house was passed down to his daughter Isadora and her husband Hiram Davison. Davison was an active member of the Elgin community, serving as a justice of the peace among other things. The property was passed to his daughter Belle Stanton. It remains in the Stanton family and thus is in its 5th generation. This building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin. It is one of the first larger residences built in the village and is connected with one of the first families in Elgin, the Hallidays. It maintains the heritage character of Perth Street specifically and relates to other buildings built soon after. It was constructed during Elgin's first major boom period and thus relates to this period and other buildings built at this time. This building is a two-story clapboard structure capped with a hipped roof covered in shingles. It has a roughly square plan with generally symmetrical facades. The front facade features a dormer with 3 windows and a roofed porch with tapered square piers on the lower story. There appears to be no additions, extensions or significant modifications. Its style resembles numerous other buildings throughout the village built by the Stantons in the decades around the turn of the century. Roughly square, hip-proof, symmetrical. This building is on Lot F, which was originally the Benjamin Halliday estate. The Hallidays' main house and carriage shop is next to this particular residence. It is possible that the Hallidays, Davidsons or Stantons built this house on their land as a rental property or a residence for one of their children. It does not turn up in the land registry records until 1986 when it is sold as part of the Hiram Stanton estate. Its architectural style suggests it was built around the turn of the century during Elgin's second major boom period 1880s until 1910. This building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin. It is built on the former Benjamin Halliday estate and relates to most of the other buildings on the east side of Perth that were also constructed on this estate. It's architecturally linked with other buildings throughout the village built in a similar style, roughly square plan, hip-proof, symmetrical. This classically inspired two-story house features a balanced 3-bay facade and a central gable with a shallow pitch. The corners of the front facade are accentuated by stone coins. Along the southern side is an enclosed porch. This house was built on land once owned by Henry Halliday. It is possible that he built this house across the road from his father's, Benjamin Halliday. The land stayed in the Halliday family until 1908 when it was sold to James Murphy for $1,600. This property helps to support the heritage character of the village and is visually linked to other historic homes along Perth Street. This larger two-story dwelling has a medium pitch roof, brick chimney on the eastern part of the roof's peak and a symmetrical 3-bay facade. The main entrance is covered by an open veranda running the length of the facade. It has a hip roof in which the north and south sides extend further down than the east and west sides. It is difficult to identify any particular features which distinguish this building as an early Methodist church. According to Sue Warren's book, The Hub of the Rideau, 1997, Wesleyan Methodists in the area had a frame church on land belonging to Mr. Merriman on Lot 13, Concession 3. Sometime around 1861, they abandoned this structure and built a brick church in Elgin upon this lot, which may very well be the beginning of this present structure. The land registry records, however, do not make it clear when the building was constructed. It was eventually sold to private owners just before the turn of the 20th century as the Wesleyan Methodists united with the Evangelical Methodists in 1884. If indeed this structure served as the Wesleyan Methodist Church, then it is most definitely linked to the history of Methodists in Elgin, along with the Elgin United Church on Main Street. This building is a 1 1/2 story red brick structure with a medium pitched roof covered in shingles. The front facade features a central doorway flanked by 2 windows and a central front gable with a window. There is a simple frieze which runs under the eaves. The roofed porch runs along the first story of the front facade and features simple posts with little decoration. It is unclear if there are any rear extensions or additions. Its style is typical of the Rideau cottage style, symmetrical 1 1/2 story with central front gable. Israel Hunter purchased this lot in 1861 from Philemon Panic. Hunter was listed as a blacksmith, mechanic and farmer in different tax rolls. The value of his property jumped considerably between 1866 and 1867, indicating that a house was built during this time. The building is also listed in the Atlas, the map from c. 1868. Israel did not live in his house long as he was stung to death by bees in 1871. It appears that his wife continued to live in the house until 1882. The building is architecturally related to other buildings throughout the area built around the same period. This building contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin. It is architecturally and visually linked with numerous other buildings built in a similar style throughout the area, although less common in the village of Elgin, built during the same period. This house features a front gable design with two bays on both the upper and lower levels. There is equally a short extension to the north and two dormers. The west and north facades feature a shallow wrap-around open porch. Herbert S. Merriman purchased a few lots along Kingston Street at the turn of the century for $1,900, which may be an indication that his house had already been built when the land was registered under his name. His older brother, Norman, purchased a lot on the other side of the street and had a house built which resembles this 120 Kingston. Their father, Isaac Merriman, was a prosperous framer who lived on lot 15C. 2. Herbert sold his father's brick farmhouse in 1903, which is, presumably, when he moved to Elgin. The property helps to maintain the heritage character of the area. Its proximity and likeness to the other Merriman brother home also helps to link the two homes and family ties which once existed along Kingston Street. The form of this house exhibits a few features common of late Victorian Gothic homes. Such features include the gable above the two-story bay windows on the main facade, giving the house an asymmetrical plan. The 1908 fire insurance map lists this building as a frame house with a brick veneer, brick being a popular construction material at the turn of the 20th century in Elgin. There is another two-story bay window on the south facade facing Halliday Street. The windows of the house are decorated with arched brick lintels. Carey purchased this lot in 1903 for $620 and shortly after probably built this house. This property helps to support the historic character of Elgin because of its brick construction and other architectural details common to many houses built at the turn of century. This is a 1 1/2-story L-shaped dwelling of brick construction. It features a medium pitch roof, gable front portion extending toward the street, a one-story closed-in porch and a small gable with a rounded window facing west on the portion of the house which projects northerly. There are dichromatic brick coins along each corner and matching arched voussoirs. The basement is rusticated with large stones. Richard Murphy purchased this lot from Philip Halliday in 1887 for $114 but later sold it to Dr. George S. and Elizabeth McGee in 1899 for $1,200. Therefore, the house was probably begun by the McGees. They lived there, along with a male domestic, until it was sold to Thomas Dwyer in 1917. Dr. McGee had his medical practice in this building. Considering the period in which this property was built as well as its physical attributes, it helps to support the historical character and identity of the village as a prosperous community in the late 19th century. According to Sue Warren, this home is the oldest surviving private stone farmhouse in South Crosby. The design is reminiscent of the Georgian style because of its balanced proportions, minimal detailing and muted ornament. An open veranda runs the length of the main facade. A small gable interrupts the front eave and accommodates the small window. Of particular note are the traces of large stone brick ovens in the interior, no doubt used to bake the bread needed for so many mouths. The house has most likely been stuccoed over for much of its history, as this was common of many stone structures. This house was built by Ebenezer Halliday, one of the founding members of Elgin. He arrived in South Crosby in 1802, enlisted in the militia during the War of 1812 and married Jane Leggett in 1819. They had 5 children together and lived in a log cabin in Lot 12 Cantu. After Jane's death, he married Parthena Olds and they had 6 children together. When his youngest son and heir, Philip, was born, he built the present house. He promoted the growth of the town by selling village lots south of Main Street in the 1850s. In 1867 he and the entrepreneur George Morton built the first cheese factory behind the house now gone, while Philip built a handsome home across the road while his son, Frank, occupied his grandfather's home. With the passing of Frank and his wife, the property was sold in 1978, thus ending the long tradition of Halliday ownership dating from the early 19th century. This farmhouse defines the early agricultural roots of the area, while its size and choice of permanent building materials attest to the growing prosperity and settlement of the town. It has historical links to its surroundings, such as the growth of the village to the north of the property, the development of the Methodist Church on land donated by Halliday, as well as the first cheese factory. It further helps to define the earlier settlement phase of Elgin by its architectural style, which is much older than the rest of the properties in town. Because of its historical and associative connections, this home is an historical landmark. The rectory is a large 2-story L-shaped building with a balanced and symmetrical facade. The brick used for its construction was brought from a local brickyard. Features of note for this property include a hip roof, a central gable, a decorative brick band across the second-story windows, a large elevated and open veranda which runs along the main facade and south side and whose sloped roof features a central gable complementing the one along the roof eave above. The windows are plainly decorated with arched brick lintels. The foundation is rusticated with large cut stones. Historically, this structure is closely associated with the St. Columbanus parish. Both the church and parish were constructed by the contractor Conley for $9,000 along with the help of the local community. This building is functionally and historically linked to its surroundings since it continues to be the rectory for St. Columbanus and, further, its brick construction echoes other residences of the day material in the town. Other contextual values are also similar to those associated with St. Columbanus. The property defined and continues to maintain the identity and presence of the Roman Catholic community in the Elgin area. The church is a landmark in terms of symbolizing a long tradition of Catholic worship in the area, representing the growth of Catholicism in Elgin during the second half of the 18th century. The church shows characteristics of the Victorian Gothic Revival style, which include bold geometric forms and solid wall surfaces. The structure is weighty and monumental. As well, the Gothic detail is integral to the design, rather than applied, such as the narrow arched windows and buttresses. There is a sturdy corner tower surmounted by 4 pointed towers, and the roof is steep and oversized. Similar designs are found in many towns and cities across the country. The materials used for construction were brought from local farms and quarries: sandstone from the Donovan and Coon frames on Hartsgravel Road, lime from the Murray Farm near Davis Lock. Before the construction of this church, worshippers from Elgin, as well as neighboring communities, attended Mass in the stone block church, named the Church of the Japanese Martyrs, near Phillipsville. In 1896, a lot was purchased from Philip Halliday as the Reverend Michael J. Pratt was given permission from Archbishop Clearly to divide his territory and form the St. Columbanus parish in Elgin. The church and rectory were built for $9,000 and lot of support from the community, including various forms of fundraisers. The church was dedicated June 2, 1899 by the Archbishop of Kingston, the Most Reverend C.H. Gautier. The bell was made in Troy, New York, at a price of $460. When fundraising efforts fell short of this goal, Philip Halliday donated the remainder of the funds and, in return, asked for the bell to be rung at his funeral. According to Sue Warren, that was the only time in the church's history that the bell was rung for a member of another church. The property defined and continues to maintain the identity and presence of the Roman Catholic community in the Elgin area. The church is also visually and historically linked to the two other churches in Elgin which were built around the same time and are also of stone construction. Its rectory is still present to the north of the church, 63 Kingston. This building is a landmark in terms of symbolizing a long tradition of Catholic worship in the area, representing the growth of Catholicism in Elgin during the second half of the 18th century. This two-story house is of brick construction with a one-story frame extension in the northeast corner. To the rear of the house is a metal-clad shed. The house has a closed porch running along its west main facade which features a set of double doors in the center flanked by squared classical columns while the lower portion widens to include a decorative wood pattern. Above the double doors is a small enclosed porch. Many of the windows are arched with brick voussoirs. A brick chimney still remains on the northern portion of the house. This handsome 2.5-story home is built in the Second Empire style, a style which is very rare in the area. Notable features include elaborate wrought iron cresting above the bay windows, balanced facade crowned by a mansard roof, a projecting central court, decorative brick arched voussoirs above the windows, gable-like dormers with triage sides, 3 open porches on the north, south, and east facades with molded details on the columns. Above the main entrance is a balcony. The wrought iron fence once ran along the perimeter of the property, equaling the decorations over the base. The decorative slate tiles were once unique to the village. Philip Halliday was the youngest son and heir of Ebenezer Halliday, one of the founding fathers of Elgin. As traditional farming methods were revolutionized in the 1870s, Philip became a successful salesman of mechanized farm equipment, traveling great distances to make sales. Consequently, he is responsible for the first mowing machine, reaper and binder in the township. In 1887 he got permission to open 2 streets, Halliday and Church. He and his wife built a cottage on Whitefish Lake, the first cottage in the region. Philip's son, Frank, occupied the Halliday homestead across the street. One of Philip's grandsons, Dr. Fred Mills, bought it in 1955 and ran a dental practice from this home. Built directly across the road from the Halliday homestead, this house maintains its historical links with its surroundings. Its imposing size and the choice of architectural styles attest to the refined taste and success of its original owner, due in part from the revolution in farming practices in the late 19th century. This building is unique to its surroundings, especially in terms of its architectural style, yet it is still connected to the town, including its building materials, its near location to the paternal home, etc. The building is a 2-story, roughly square structure clad in clapboard and capped with a hitched roof covered in shingles and a front dormer window. There is a rear 1-story extension with gabled roof covered in metal and a central brick chimney. Date is unknown, but most likely a converted woodshed/summer kitchen. The front facade features 2 bays, the lower story being concealed by a covered porch which features decorative wood details. A simple cornice runs under the eaves. All windows are rectangular with thick, simple trim. There is a two-story barn/shed in the rear. The 1908 fire insurance map lists a two-story, square building as under construction. Although George Martin didn't acquire the land until 1910 from Philip Halliday, it is likely that Martin was the original owner of the house. Its high sale 6 years later indicate the building was definitely finished by 1914. It contributes to the heritage character of the village, specifically relating to the second major boom period it experiences around the turn of the century. It relates to this later period when Halliday and Church Streets were opened for development. It's also architecturally linked to numerous other buildings in the village roughly square with its roof. The building is a 1½ story rectangular structure with a medium-pitched roof covered in metal. Since 1982, the central brick chimney has been removed and replaced with a metal chimney on the west-facing facade. The front facade features two windows with an off-centered doorway between them and small steps and landing up to the door. The foundation is covered in cement and was probably repaired or replaced at some point since it was moved to this location. There is a rear extension on the north-facing facade that is most likely a converted woodshed or summer kitchen. This extension appears on the 1908 fire insurance map, but unclear if it was part of original building when it was on Main Street. This building has the form of an early and rather modest dwelling dating from the first decades of settlement in the area. It is most likely of post and beam construction. Further connection its architectural form to this early period. This residence is connected with the Mitchells, a very early family in Elgin. In approximately 1845, Mitchell moved to the location of the future Dargaville store on the corner of Main and Kingston Street, and built this frame or post and beam house. Mitchell was involved in land speculation, shoemaking and selling whiskey. The Mitchells were converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints during the conversion sweep in the 1830s, however they did not immigrate with many others to the United States. In 1852, they were listed as the only remaining Mormons in the township. The area around their property was nicknamed Norfu after the Mormon settlement in the USA, and the name persisted even after the village was officially named Elgin. Mitchell officially bought his Main Street land in 1873, the year before he sold it to Dargaville. However, it is known he was here much earlier. Dargaville built his large brick store on the corner in 1893, therefore the building must have been moved to its current site. Prior to that, despite Dargaville not owning the land on Halliday until 1902, this building was moved from its original site in the final years of the 19th century from the busy crossroads of Main and Kingston Streets. However, it has been on its present site for over a century. Although it has been severed from its original context, its history on this particular site relates it to a new context. This building relates to the early settlement structures throughout the area, built in the first few decades of the 19th century. Its post and beam construction also relates it physically to those other early structures. It may be the earliest structure still standing in Elgin, so therefore it helps define and maintain the heritage character of the area, specifically the period of its early development. The alterations to this structure appear to be comparatively minimal, contributing to its integrity and heritage value. The building is a two-story structure with a roughly square plan set on a stone foundation and capped with a hipped roof covered in shingles. The front facade sloping roof features a central dormer which contains a semicircular window. The front facade has 3 bays with a central door and small porch leading up to the entrance. The rectangular windows are roughly the same size. All feature plain thick trim. The cinder block chimney is on the east-facing facade. There is a rear 1-story extension, most likely a converted woodshed/summer kitchen, appears on 1908 fire insurance map. 2-story residences with roughly square plans and hipped roof were popular types of residences built by the Stanton brothers around the turn of the century. Ebenezer Halliday passed his land down to his son, Philip Halliday, in 1884. 3 years later, Church and Halliday Streets were opened for development. The property does not show up again until 1903, when it is sold by Richard Stanton for $1,400. It was most likely built before it being sold to Stephen Ripley in 1903, and its style resembles other Stanton Brothers structures throughout the village. It contributes to the heritage character of the village, specifically relating to the second major boom period around the turn of the century. It relates to this later period when Halliday and Church Streets were opened for development. Its styles resemble a number of other throughout the village, and thus it is architecturally linked with this popular turn-of-the-century design. This building is a one-story red brick structure with a cross-gabled roof which is covered in shingles, all set on a stone foundation. There are matching side projections which extend from the principal rectangular shape plan. These side projections feature two side doors originally used as a boys' and girls' entrance decorated with large wood brackets. The front facade of the building features 3 large windows with buff brick arched voussoirs. Above the windows are 3 gables, the side one being triangular and the center gable rounded with a triangular pediment. All gables have simple frieze. There are buff brick joining at the main corners of the building. The central chimney site at the approximate point where the ridges meet. There is a small belfry with a hipped onion-like roof at the peak of the front facade roof, immediately behind the central rounded gable and large window. A similar belfry existed in the historical photo but is missing in 1984. Its style is characteristic of brick schoolhouses built in the latter years of the 19th century, specifically its large windows, recommended for a more suitable learning environment, namely better ventilation. There were at least 2 previous schools built in the village of Elgin before the brick building on Halliday. In 1872, the Ontario School Act made education compulsory for all children aged 7 to 12, which increased the need for larger schoolhouses. In 1887, the 3rd or possibly 4th school in Elgin was built. The same year, Philip Halliday was granted permission to open 2 new streets in order to increase the number of lots and building sites within the village. The land was the Halliday Farm. The new school was built at the intersection of these new streets, Church and Halliday. The Broadville Weekly Recorder mentions Frederick Tabor of Morton as the contractor for a fine schoolhouse in Elgin. It served as the village schoolhouse for nearly 80 years until the modern consolidated school was built next door in 1964. The schoolhouse contributes to the heritage character of the village, marking the beginning of the second major boom period and relating to this period through its materials. Having served as the village school for nearly 80 years, the old brick schoolhouse is a historic landmark within the community, confirmed by its heritage designation. It also continues to function as a meeting place and thus continues to be a community landmark as a place of gathering. Overall, it contributes to the heritage character of the village of Elgin, specifically to the development of Church and Halliday Street, which began with the building of the schoolhouse in 1887, the same year the streets were opened. This building is a 2-story structure clad in aluminum siding and capped with a medium steep-pitched shingled roof. There is a 1-story extension on the south-facing facade. There is a covered porch on the north-facing facade that may be concealing an original doorway, however this porch was in the 1940 photograph. The north-facing facade is otherwise simple with 2 bays flanking a central bay. There is also a 1.5-story large shed/barn in the back that has since been converted into a garage. This outbuilding appears on the 1908 fire insurance map. This building served as the 2nd or possibly 3rd schoolhouse in the village of Elgin before the larger brick schoolhouse was built down the street in 1887. The first schoolhouse was built at the junction of Main and Kingston in 1842. but it is probable that an even earlier meeting hall was used as a schoolhouse. Land records show the trustees SS No. 5 Crosby purchasing the land of the second/third schoolhouse only in 1886 before it was sold the next year.